Okay, so continuing our lesson for chapter 2, we are now in section 2.1, the church divides. What you want from here is to go to our LODA-USD website and then go ahead launch Clever and then Clever to Cengage Learning. Cengage Learning, you want to launch the student edition and log in with your student credentials, which is your email and your password. Go ahead, go to Unit 1, and then from Unit 1 to Chapter 2, the Byzantine Empire, and from Chapter 2, go ahead, open Section 2, the Later Empire, and we are doing Lesson 1, Section 2.1, the Church Divides. So the essential questions for this chapter is how did the Byzantine Empire carry on the culture and traditions of the old Roman Empire, that is the western side of the Roman Empire. So the objective of this lesson is to explain how the differences in the development of Christianity in the East, which is the Byzantine Empire, and the West, which is the old Roman Empire, to the split that happened around 1054 AD. So to give you an additional information besides the one available on your textbook, so the split of Christianity in the East and the West had its origin when the Roman Empire was divided into eastern and western parts. The Western Roman Empire was destroyed by the invasion of barbaric tribes, while the Eastern Roman Empire, which is the Byzantine Empire, thrived for more than 1,000 years. Other differences also caused the two sides to drift apart. The main language in the West was Latin, while Greek was dominant in the East. As for some time, few people spoke both languages, resulting in communication difficulties between the two sides and increased the split. The church was also affected by the division between the East and the West, resulting in different rites and views of religious teachings, and ultimately the East and West schism. And schism simply means divide. The main idea of this lesson is that Christianity in the East and the West developed differently, caused arguments, and finally a split. When the Roman Empire was divided, the cultures of the Eastern and Western empires developed differently. So argument arose over Christian religious practices. In the East, the emperor was seen as God's representative on earth. The emperor had a great deal of influence over the church and its leader, the patriarch. So if you can still recall about the fall of Rome after the barbarians attacked Rome, around 476, the Roman Empire fell. As you may recall, the Pope in Rome grew extremely powerful and claimed absolute authority over the Western Christians, even kings. He then claimed authority over the Eastern Christians, which led to a power struggle with the Byzantine emperors, with different leaders, and with very little contact. So Eastern and Western Christian drifted apart in their beliefs and practices. So what I'm trying to say here is this. Since Christianity became the state religion of the Roman Empire, it is for the first time that this state religion, which is Christianity, was being torn apart or being divided into two because of different practices of these two branches of Christianity. So one of the key conflicts of the East and Western Christian Church is about the Trinity. The Western Church adopted a creed or a statement of belief that claimed that the Holy Spirit comes from the Father and the Son as well. So the Eastern Church maintained the belief that the Holy Spirit comes only from the Father. Another major disagreement was about icons. Images of Jesus and saints were worshipped in the Western side. Many Christians had icons and some began to pray to them. In the East, the emperor banned icons and ordered that they be destroyed. In the West, the Pope rebuked the emperor and condemned the destruction of the icons. So religion was an extremely important topic for the Byzantine people. They believed their eternal salvation depended on proper understanding of God and the Bible. As a result, these religious disagreements brought about strong feelings. Well, of course, that is putting it lightly. Now let's take a look at the map of the Great Schism during 1054, how the Roman Empire was divided into these major branches of Christianity. If you will look at the map, you will see that the purple-colored parts of the empire belongs to the Eastern Orthodox Church, which is the Byzantine Empire. And the golden or yellow part of the map belongs to the Roman Catholic Church, which is obviously the western side of the Roman Empire. On the western side belongs to the Roman Catholic Church, England, Scotland, France, Sweden, Norway, Poland, Hungary, the Holy Roman Empire, Burgundy, parts of Spain, modern-day Spain, and it's bigger, actually bigger than the Eastern Orthodox Church of the Byzantine Empire. And on the eastern side, or the Eastern Orthodox Church, belongs the Eastern Slavic principalities. We have Constantinople here, and of course the great vast territories of the Byzantine Empire. So what really happened during the divide or schism of 1054? Growing disagreements created suspicion and hostility between Eastern and Western Christians. Finally, the Pope's representative in Constantinople announced that the Byzantine Patriarch was excommunicated, kicked out, no longer part of the church. Well, obviously the Eastern Church or Eastern Orthodox Church leaders were not happy about this. So they were furious. The Patriarch then excommunicated the Pope. It's like, you're fired. No, I'm not fired. You're fired kind of situation in 1054. The church split in what is called Eastern-West Schism, or the Schism of 1054. A schism is a separation, just like what I said, or a division. The Roman Catholic Church remained in the West, and the Eastern Orthodox Church developed in the Byzantine Empire or Byzantium. Now you have to understand that the Western and the Eastern Church are not completely different. So they share some common grounds or similarities. For example, they both base their beliefs on Jesus and the Bible. And they both worship in churches with services led by priests and bishops. However, in the Roman Catholic Church, the Pope had authority over the clergy and even kings. Priests could not marry, and the services were conducted in Latin. In the Eastern Orthodox Church, however, the emperor had spiritual authority over the clergy. So priests could marry, and services were conducted in Greek. So let's just have a recap about the differences of these two churches. So the Western Catholic Church had their Pope as the supreme authority over the clergy and even kings. Their priests are not allowed to marry, and the services were conducted in Latin. In the Eastern Orthodox Church, however, the Byzantine Empire, the emperor and not the Pope had spiritual authority over the clergy and priest, could marry, and services were conducted in Greek. So those are the three major differences of these two branches of Christianity during this great schism of 1054, or the schism of 1054. Again, the differences is the head of the church, priest, could marry in the eastern side, and on the western side they are not allowed to have a wife and a family. And in the western side, Latin is the official language of the Mass or the service. And in the eastern side, Greek is the official language of the Mass or the service. Now let's take a look at the review and assess questions. The first one, reading check. What was one principal differences between the Eastern and Western churches? And I repeated this 3 times in this lesson. Next, determine word meanings. How does knowing that ortho refers to correct and dox refers to opinion clarify the meaning of the word orthodox? And finally, interpret maps. What does the map add to the text description of the Schism of 1054. What does the map add to the text description of the Schism of 1054? In other words, what additional information that you get by looking or inspecting the map, besides, of course, the text that we just read under that map, the Schism of 1054. There you have it. Those are your review and assess questions. What I want you to do is to go back to our Google Classroom and open Review and Assess Section 1 and Section 2. And go to Section 2.1, which is the lesson that we just covered, pages 50 to 51 in your textbook, and answer the questions on the right side of this Google slide. Go ahead, go to our Google Classroom.